Welcome to Caribbean Straight Talk with real conversations and great interviews. Hi, this is Lima Dunbar with Caribbean Straight Talk. Our other host, Mr. George Busson, is still on location. Another interesting show for you tonight. Another interesting show. It is Black History Month, but we are Black 365. And our guest tonight is Dr. Marvin Dunn. A native Floridian, Dr. Dunn is a professor emeritus and a retired chairman of the Department of Psychology at Florida International University. Born during the Jim Crow era, he brings a perspective to Black history that has been missed, distorted, and minimalized in the past. He co authored the book, The Miami Riot of 1980, Crossing the Bounds in 1984, authored also Black Miami in the 20th Century, 1997, and A History of Florida Through Black Eyes, 2016. Dr. Dunn is regularly sought out by a lot of national television programs as he provides insight on race issues in America. He has been published in major newspapers and he is a nationally respected scholar, author, historian, and community activist in race and ethnic relations. He lives in Miami, Florida. And I think we are so honored to have him as a guest tonight because I got a lot of questions right here.
Let's go for it. Let's go for it. We got to even
Done. Okay. So the first question out the bat is you grew up in the Jim Crow era. Please
Yeah.
share some of your experiences growing up and when juxtaposed with our present time, what similarities do you see?
When I was 7 years old, thank you for having me to
You're
begin with.
welcome. Thank you for
This is
being
a
here.
very, very important moment in history in our country and in this region. Um, I first realized that I was Black when I was 7 years old. I was standing in line at the post office in Volusia County, Florida, Central Florida, with my mother, 1947. And there was a white line for the post office, and there was a colored line for the post office. And I noticed that the postmaster called all the white people up first while we had to wait. So I tugged on my mother's hand and said, why are we waiting? And she sort of hit my head a little bit on the back with her hand. And when we got outside, she said we had to wait because we're colored.
Oh, Lord.
I was 7 years old, and I realized I have to wait for white people because I'm colored. I'm old enough to have had to sit on the back of the bus. I'm 82 years old. I was born in 1940. I'm old enough to have attended segregated schools in Florida. I'm old enough to have gone to white people's doors through the houses through the back doors. I lived through that. And I have an 82-year perspective that might help us put things into perspective at this time. Thank you for having me on your program.
Dr. Dunn, I'm listening to you and I'm like, I have no patience whatsoever. So I'm listening to you, giving your experiences, and I'm like, I couldn't stand in a line, in the black line or the colored line, while white people are standing in another line. I know that my anger would have been so intense, so intense. How difficult was it after you had a couple of these experiences to keep your anger on a leash? How
You
difficult was
see,
that?
that's the tragedy of African American history. We were subject to these things and we had to accept them. You couldn't it was 1947, for God's sakes. So what were we to do? Except as a 7-year-old child, except that as a colored person in the United States, I had to wait on white people. Listen, I didn't question that. Who did in my day?
It's
That
almost like if you were conditioned, right?
exactly. You had to accept your status at that time. We're talking about the 1940s. So no, there was no resistance to it. We had to accept it. Thank God the 1950s and 60s arrived and we all woke up and acted.
Do you see any similarities in today? I mean, it's 2023. And even though I didn't live at that time, I wasn't alive at that time. I kind of see certain juxtapositions that make me angry.
They should. One of those that has transcended these decades has been white guilt,
Mm.
has been the sense among many white people in our country that, listen, we gave you the civil rights movement, the civil rights bill, we gave you affirmative action. What more do you people want? There's a sense that in America now, among many white people, that they are the subject of discrimination, that blacks now have the advantage. And that's why you see this coalescence around this man DeSantis and others
We're
like him.
gonna get. Trust me, we're gonna get to him. We're gonna
I
get
hope
to him.
so. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worth the
Oh
discussion.
no, we're
Go
gonna
ahead.
get to him. I'm kind of warming up to that, okay?
All right.
Carter G. Woodson is the father of Black History Month back in 1926. And as you know, his goal was to make the celebration of Black history a serious area of study. Hence, I believe that's how the African American studies arrived today. Do you believe that Mr. Woodson's goal has been realized?
No, no, his goal has not been realized. In fact, his goal has been suppressed uh, relentlessly in the last few decades. Uh, African American history is so brutal,
Mm,
so pervasive, so long in its duration that many people, white people, want to move away from it because it was so brutal and so vicious and violent and all of that. But we can't allow that to happen. Just because some white people will feel guilty or angry or hurt because this history is revived, that is no reason not to do it. We have an obligation as African Americans in this whole region, not just in my country, because as you well know, much of the suffering that we're talking about that took place in America took place in the Caribbean,
mhm,
perhaps in larger measure. So,
mhm.
so this is not an African American issue. This is a Black issue that
It is.
transcends the diaspora, and all of us are touched by it.
It sure does. Thank you. Now we come into come with Ron DeSantis. I have learned it through conversations with Dr. Patrick Coggins. I don't know if you're aware of who he is. He's an educator at Stetson University, and he raised our awareness of Florida Statute 1003.42, which mandates that African American studies be taught K through 12. Are you aware of this statute?
Oh, yeah. Listen, I was on the task force that first met to make sure this happened. That was back in the 1990s. I was one of the original members. And it was a great moment that we all met in Tallahassee and talked about having African American history incorporated into the curricula throughout the 67 school districts of Florida. And then nothing happened.
Okay,
Zero
so,
happened.
so here
Uh,
comes my question.
yes.
How do you see it within the context of the ongoing argument about African American Studies AP classes being blocked in Florida until certain topics were taken out of the curriculum? Because, in my mind, if there is a law that very few people seem to know about, why are we having this conversation about Ron DeSantis and everything that he's doing with this stay woke? It's like, why are we having this conversation? Because in my mind, sir, the NAACP has no clause. The NAACP has no bite. If it had any, it was back in the day with Judge Thurgood Marshall and W.E.B. Du Bois. If there's a law, why is it being violated within the context of the problem that we have right now?
Why is it being violated? First, please understand
Yes.
this is not about African American history. This is about the White House. This is about gaining the support of the right wing of the Republican Party.
Party.
This is not about African DeSantis. No, what does he know about Black history? What does he know? I mean, they listen in their response to the college board about their objections to it. They misspelled the word African. And now they question whether or not we have uh, 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 um, material that is of value to history. This is a political stance. This has nothing to do with our true history. Mr. DeSantos realizes that there are enough wounded white Americans who would gather around him under the banner that blacks have had much too much and it's time to stop it. So there is this opposition to African American history based upon this undercurrent white opposition to black progress.
Okay, but what about my what I brought up about and the NAACP? Because in times like this, you look to certain people. For instance, when this first came about, um, and then Ben Crump said that he would sue DeSantis, representing three high school students. That's the only time you heard the NAACP say anything. You didn't hear them say anything till then. I guess by now you figure I have a beef with them. I do.
You
I
should.
do.
You
I
should.
do.
You should. The
I
NAACP,
have a beef with them and I have a beef with the Florida Democratic Party. You know what I'm
good.
saying?
Listen, thank you from the Caribbean for having a beef with these things. The NAACP should have been out front on this. They may yet be out front on it, but for whatever reason, they have been in the shadows. This is not a time for Black organizations like the NAACP, the Urban League, and others that we could mention to be lurking in the shadows, waiting for this bully to make his next move. I'm very disappointed. Listen, I love the NAACP. They did things for us in the day that only they could have done, but they are a little bit late to the barricades right now.
Wow. I got to tell you, I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I didn't expect you to be so forthright. I appreciate that. That tells me that this conversation, up until the end of this show, is going to be something else. So thanks again. you know. But with that being said, we're going to take a little break, and we will return with Dr. Marvin Dunn.
This is Professor GT inviting you to join Lima Dunbar along with DJs Code Red and Kevorkian on the People's Chat Room every Saturday from 12 to 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern Standard Time on iTunesRadio.com.
iTunes Entertainment Magazine, where the focus is to bring information and entertainment wrapped in a little something extra that is pertinent and relative to all of us, regardless of culture. Our features aim at catering somewhat to the curiosity in all of us, whether it be business, entertainment, health and wellness, immigration, our youth, and more. So please visit our website at www.itunesentertainmentmagazine.com or itunesentmagazine.com. Also inviting you to check us out on IG and Twitter at iTunesEntMag. And we are back. Stimulating conversation. Really, really excited because, anybody that knows me knows that I like a good conversation. So, Dr. Dunn is our guest tonight on Caribbean Street Talk. So, let's continue the conversation. Please share with our listeners excerpts of your book, A History of Florida Through Black Eyes. Um, and I gotta let you know that I intend to order this book because it sounds like a good read. So please share excerpts of it and parts of the book that still apply to today or apply to today. I think I know what you're going to share, but go ahead.
Thank you for that question. On March 6th,
Mm-hmm.
I will take a busload of high school students and their grandparents or parents to Live Oak, Florida, one of my most tragic visitations in Black Florida history. In 1944, Three white men lynched a 15-year-old black boy named Willie James Howard for writing a love letter to a white girl that he fell in love with in a department store in downtown Live Oak, Florida, where he worked. And this girl's father discovered this letter, took two other white men to this boy's house.
Wow.
He's clinging to his mom's knees. She's asking, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And at gunpoint, they take Willie James Howard from his mom. Listen, they go to where his dad worked at a lumber yard and force him to get into the car that at gunpoint. Although they have his son, so they don't have to force him. He gets into the car. They tie this boy's hands and feet on the way to the Swanee River. They get to the river. Willie James gets out with his dad. This man puts a gun to the boy's head and says, "Jump or take what's in this barrel." So Willie James takes out his little Bible that he carries with him and gave it to his dad. His dad says, "I'm glad that you went to church, son." And the boy jumped and drowned. And in 48 hours, his body was retrieved by a black undertaker, buried in an unmarked grave, and forgotten about it for decades. And we're going to Willie James Howard's grave on January 6th in Live Oak, Florida, with about 40 high school students and their parents or grandparents. And listen, we're going to grieve him. Thankfully, some people in Live Oak brought this story back alive, put a gravestone for this boy, had a memorial service for him in his church, and now we know where he is and can visit him. So that's one of the stops on the Teach the Truth tour that we will be taking. We're taking our kids, and I want to make this point, with their parents and their grandparents at no cost. We pay everything, lodging, we pay everything, so that they can have this experience together and then go to the Thanksgiving dinner, go to the Christmas party, and share these stories across generations. That's how we pass on our Black history orally. That's how it happens in the Caribbean. That's how it happens in our country. So that is what we're doing as a counter narrative to Ron DeSantis. I know you don't want to talk about him right now, but we're doing this because that governor has a message out there that Black history is broken and wrong, and we know that it's not.
It's not that I don't want to talk about him. I want to talk about him. I want to talk about him so much, but I don't want. I never knew about this 15-year-old. That just breaks my heart.
Oh, listen, I made a movie about him. It's on our website. If you go to dunnhistory.com, dunnhistory.com, I made a film about Willie James Howard in detail. I talked to his aunt. Of course, the boy, his mom's long dead, his dad's long gone. But the Willie James Howard film, Murder on the Swanee, is on my website. I urge folks to take a look at that. So are other films, on Rosewood, for example, and Newberry. These are all places in Florida where incredibly violent things happened that we're trying to preserve for future generations to know and appreciate and pray over.
You see, here's one of my pissed offness. I get angry, not to me, Ron DeSantis is doing what Ron DeSantis has been doing for years because everything that you've read about him says that he's been pulling these stunts since he was in law school. All right.
That's right.
Who I get angry with, sir, are people who do not vote. I get angry. Okay, I have a list here. I get angry with the Florida Democratic Party. They take us for granted. So now I'm an independent. I've been an independent for the past, I think, two cycles, election cycles. I get angry with the NAACP. And then I get angry with my Caribbean people. I get angry with African Americans. I get angry with people who don't vote. I get angry with people who can't seem to make the connection between what is not going on in their lives to voting. Okay, I get angry, and I have learned over the months and the past couple years to exhale, to learn to just, what's
I'm so
breathe.
glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that because you know what? Anger doesn't work. It doesn't. I've been angry for 40 years and it doesn't work. I'll tell you what does work. Prayer works because it gives us peace. Dialogue works because it helps us connect.
Mm-hmm.
And remembering works because it keeps our ancestors alive. Believe me, I'm now 82, so I can look back a lot of decades, including the decades when I was your age, and as angry as you are, if not angrier. But I realized over the years that anger has its place, but it does not advance us. King knew that. Gandhi knew that. They knew that we reach progress through peace, understanding, and reaching out to others with whom we don't who don't agree with us. And just to maybe put a cap on it, most Americans are not racist. They really aren't. Most white Americans are not. They may be uninformed, they may be uninvolved, but most Americans are not. We would not have made the progress that we have made in our country if most Americans were like DeSantis and his ilk.
Sure.
We are on a detour. Somehow or another, this autocracy, this man, baby Trump, as I call him, has captured American attention, captured international attention. But listen to me, please. Listen to me. This will not work. This will not work. The American people are not stupid. People in the Caribbean are not stupid. We see what is happening here. And maybe I'm just overly optimistic because I've lived long enough to be able to look back a lot of detail, decades. This is not going to work. Uh, our history, no one man can bury 500 years of African American history in America and in the Caribbean. It will not work. We will prevail.
Okay. Okay, let me just soak up a little bit of your optimism. Let me see. I'm working on it. I'm working. I'm
Keep,
working on
you're funny. Keep working. I like it. You're funny. Keep working on it. Listen. I was there. I was there 40 years ago where you are. And may I be honest, I wanted to give up on our country. I spent 6 years as a naval officer on on aircraft carriers defending my
it.
country for 6 years. And and then they killed King, and then they killed Robert and Kennedy. And at that moment, and you're not old enough to appreciate going back that far, but some folks listening to this program may be able to go back that far in their memories. Those were dark days. Those were days we didn't know what was going to come next when they took King from us and they took Kennedy from us. But look where we are. Obama slept in the White House for 8 years.
Yeah, he did.
So, and one other thing I'll say about this man DeSantis, I know I keep going back to him because listen, I live in the state with him. DeSantis won the governorship of Florida by 18,000 votes to a black man. He almost lost. He squeaked in to the governorship. So his political base is not all that solid as we go forward. And I think what he's doing in Florida is not going to work in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, and other places where he needs to win to be president.
See, so let me tie into, let me just expand on some of what you just said. I firmly believe that this state is not red. I feel the state is purple.
That's
But
beautiful.
because of redistricting, he has managed to make it look like if it's red, but it's not red. It's not
Correct.
red, you know? Um, Next question. I'm loving this. I know that you have followed through on this. You have purchased land. However, you made the following statement in an article from January 9 of this year. African Americans need to own the bloodland. We need to own some of the places where these terrible things have happened so we can retell these stories, not to make anybody feel bad, but to preserve the history for its own sake. What do you think is the hesitancy behind the lack of action by some of our people? If you see it as a lack of action, or maybe you may see it as they just don't know, and that's why.
You know, one of our problems as black people here and I think in the Caribbean is we need a hero. We need a king. We need a person to rise up and lead us forward. And in those periods when we don't have someone like that, we seem to be lost, as I think we are right now. And I don't see anyone on the horizon to move us to the next stage in terms of national, if not international, leadership among people of African descent. So, what do? We go local. We go local to our local political leaders and insist with them that they move us forward while we pray that another king comes along, another hero comes along. We must go to the school board meetings, for example, to the legislative committee meetings. We have power that we don't appreciate. These folks who are running slaughter right now politically are in a minority. And I believe that most Floridians, like you said, are not red. Most of them are purple. And we
Mm-hmm.
can deliver justice and openness to Florida once we get past this current period that I see is so dark.
We have another show, the People's Chat Room, that hopefully you should be on within the next couple months. And I got to tell you, we're on every Saturday. And we have sang that song religiously for many years. The state government is very important. Local government is very important. Run for city commissioner, run for something, because people get confused when they think that the presidential election is where the meat is at. The meat is on the state
Right.
level.
That's right.
But again, this is all about education and educating the masses, educating our people. With the last election cycle, we had Sandra Fatmi on within Central Florida, obviously not South Florida. So we had a lot of those that were running for government. Maxwell Frost, who won, I've known him since he was a kid. So he has been on this show at least twice or three times, and he's been on the People's Chat Room a couple of times because he believes in grassroots, because that's how he was raised. Again, this is something that we believe in, so we sing that mantra over and over. And even though there are days that I honestly get tired, I do get tired. I remember I can't get tired. I gotta keep on fighting. So in reading up on you, I know that where you purchased the land, that there was a slight, there was an altercation, a verbal altercation with a neighbor that was shouting out some
Yes.
derogatory language at
Yes.
you or to you. How did it feel when this man was calling you the N word and you and your son? I mean, I know you can't speak for your son, but how did you feel when it was coming at you?
We were in Rosewood on September 6th, preparing to have people come out in January for the 100th year recognition of the Rosewood Massacre.
Mm-hmm.
And my neighbor, I purchased this land, 5 acres, in 2008. Had not spoken to this man. This is a very rural area, dirt roads. This is not a built up area. I've not spoken to this man since I purchased this property. And on September 6th, we were out making arrangements for the event on January 8th. And my neighbor comes out in his big truck and he rolls up to me. Now we're getting ready to leave. There are about 8 or 9 of us on the road getting ready to leave. And he says to me, "What's going on out here?" And I said, "Well, this is my property, and and I didn't get any farther than that."
Oh,
He said, "Well, why don't y'all park on your side of the road?" I said, "Well, this is a county road, sir. We'll park wherever we want to." He went into a rage, took his truck, spun the wheels, went into his property across the street, comes back out a couple of minutes later at full speed and shouting racial epithets, I won't repeat them on your program, at us, and almost kills my son and speeds off.
wow.
So we called the police. They came out, did a report. He is now being charged with a second-degree felony, using his vehicle as a deadly weapon. And now the FBI is involved because he's now being charged with a hate
Hate
crime
crime.
as
Uh-huh.
well. So that's where that stands. Now, to answer your question, I have been called a nigger 5 times in my life, and I remember each time. I remember each time. When a person says that to you, it wounds you. It stays with you. It's a wound about something you can't do anything about if you wish to. So I have no easy answer as to how to get over that hurt. We carry that with us. I'm not, many of us have been subject to that, and we carry that hurt forward. But what I've been trying to say to people is that you can't let your pain and your hurt determine how you react to other people. Because listen, most white people in our country and my country are not racist. They really aren't. Most white people, we would not have made the progress we've made if most whites in our country were racist. Uh, they may be misguided on certain items, not informed on certain items, frightened about certain things that come up politically. But America is a country that moves forward in the right direction towards human justice. So I think what's happening to us now with baby Trump. All right, okay, I apologize.
But thanks for reminding me
Here's
that
baby Trump.
ever so often I have to remember too that you're right, we would not have gotten this far because whites marched with blacks.
Yes.
They were on the front lines when we had some of these activists being killed and hunted down and killed. Some of
That's
them were white.
And some of them were
You know?
killed. You're right.
Yes, some
You're
of
right.
them were killed, and which makes me kind of emotional sometimes because the right to vote is not really a right because it hasn't been codified. But you have to remember that so many people died to get us to this point. And
Yes.
and a lot of people either don't know, choose to forget,
Absolutely. You're so
you know.
right. So
Yeah, because sir, I wasn't born in this country. I've been living here now for 35 plus years. I came from Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, in that country, we have our stuff going on, but we see ourselves reflected in our government. Yes, there's corruption, but we still see ourselves reflected in our government in high places. So the level or the depth of what has happened here over the past couple of decades, we didn't see to that extent. What we have is classism. Got a lot of that, you know. And
Mhm.
so for me, I get kind of like upset because I'm like, I came here to this country and I am much more passionate about voting than some of y'all that born here, you know. So I'm getting
It's
I
your
got
show.
all of that.
But you're still right. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get on the same page as you. If African Americans who have the vote allow DeSantis to take this thing national and take this old woke mob crap national,
Mhm.
and we don't stand up for this, what in the hell would we stand up for? This is the most serious attack on us since the civil rights movement. And if we don't stop this man, it's our fault. Listen, if conservatives cannot elect a president alone, they
Mhm.
need others of
Mhm.
us Americans to join in with them. And if African Americans don't turn out in record numbers in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, and Michigan, we know what DeSantis and his crowd would do in Alabama and Mississippi and all of that. We have to turn out in the swing states
We have
in
to.
large
We have
numbers and defeat this man because he's going to get the nomination. The Republicans love what they hear from him. They love
Oh,
this
yeah.
crap.
I
So
mean,
we're
you got Disney handing money, giving money hand over fist, you
thinking,
know?
how about that? So no, he's a strutting rooster right now. But I'm just telling you, I have more faith. I don't want to get emotional, but I didn't spend 6 years of my life in the uniform of a United States naval officer on fighting ships for this America that I see coming forward. This is not my America. And I remain steadfast that this phase will pass
Mhm.
and our true country, our true nature will come forward.
Amen to that. And with that, we're going to take a small break and we will return on the other side with Dr. Marvin Dunn. We'll be back.
Been here since day one. Hey, it's your girl, Coach Lady Q, asking you to join me on the Glow 365 TV every first Tuesday for the Mia Allman Show, hosted by yours truly, followed by the second Tuesday with Holistic Health Show with Coach Dunn. We stroll down to the third Tuesday with On Q Show, hosted by evangelist Coach Lady Q. Then we close out the month with the Sophie G Show, hosted by Coach Sophie G. Join us as we go live on Facebook and YouTube at Glow 365 TV Show every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time as we talk about the mind, body, and soul. A conversation you don't want to miss.
And we are back. And I'm smiling from ear to ear because, again, if y'all know me, y'all know I love a good conversation. And conversations like this, wow, I'm enjoying it. We have with us Dr. Marvin Dunn. All right. So let me go into this next question. Okay. In your assessment, what are your thoughts on the apparent difficulty for African Americans and the Caribbean Americans to see that our histories and cultures are intertwined as well as our collective futures?
I am so glad that you asked that question because here in Miami, in Florida, we still have certain divisions among African Americans and Caribbean Americans or Caribbean immigrants. That's ridiculous.
What? Tell me about it.
It's ridiculous. When people see us, people who are not white, who are not black, see us, we're all black to them until we
Mm-hmm.
open our mouths and they say you got a little patois. Um, one of the, I won't say tragedies, one of the things about African American history and Caribbean history is that we have not come together and recognized that we are in the same boat. We have the same issues. Uh, I won't go into details, but just to make a point, when the Haitians arrived in Miami, starting in
Mm-hmm.
the late 70s and early 80s, and showing up in desperate position circumstances on our shores, African Americans were terrible in our response. Did we welcome them? We did not. Did we despise them as many white people did? We did. And I am embarrassed even to this day, 40 years later, about how we rejected our brothers and sisters who made that dangerous journey to reach the shores of Miami, and we were not there for them.
Mm-hmm.
We were not there for them as the Cubans were for the folks who came in after they came in.
Mm-hmm.
So we still have a way to go in terms of intra-racial, not intra-racial, getting together within our own race so that we dispel some of these things about Caribbean blacks and African Americans and all of that,
But
and come together to
I got,
realize
I gotta I gotta jump in there because I mean, even with us within us as Caribbean people, there's a lot of it's fractured. The Jamaicans one side, the Trinis one side, the Grenadians one side, the Guyanese one side. It's like they don't realize, we don't realize within ourselves that we need to come together, much
ex-
less us coming together with African Americans. You know,
ex-
people like me, we get it, but we have a long way to go, and it's like education, education, education.
well, it's education, but you know, black people need a villain. We need somebody. We need a George Wallace. We need a person that brings us together
Mhm. You said that.
because we recognize that individual as a common enemy. And fortunately, history doesn't produce that many people that often. But for some reason, we as black people here or in the Caribbean somehow or another lay back until the savior comes forward, the Martin Luther King Jr. or the whoever in the Caribbean or Haiti. And that white people don't wait for that. They'll
Mhm.
organize at the ground level, at the county level, at the city level to take power, while we wait for some mythical figure to come forward and lead us to the next step. We got to get busy at the ground level to make progress as a race and stop looking for another Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X or anybody else to deliver us to the promised land.
Mhm. Amen to that. For me, I feel like if in order for something like that to happen, which is one of the things that I was suggesting to some of the people that were running in the last cycle, election cycle, it's still for me. It still comes back to education. So I suggested to a lot of them every quarter you should be having a town hall, not at the same location, but other look, various locations around the city, around the county, the counties,
Mhm.
because it still comes back to education, education, education. Because I think when all these people are in a room together, whether it's Caribbean people, African Americans, even whites that are on the lower strata, when we start coming together, we realize that we have more similarities than differences.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
so
That's right. Uh, and every effort that's made to override that gap
uh-huh,
is one that moves us all forward. You know, we give far too much weight to the extreme elements in our society. These folks have much more power than they are entitled to, but because they have Fox News and they have their pundits and all that, we think, oh my God, I guess they are not that powerful. If we band together and confront what we know is an evil,
mm-hmm,
and I got to go back to my governor. I live in the state with him, so y'all, well, you do too. You're right. You know, we live with this man, and
uh-huh.
we see what's coming for America if he gets to be president, and what's coming for the world. And it is a tragic expectation, as I see it, because he will use our backs to climb to power, and that is so despicable for a person who wishes to be the leader of the free world.
I really don't think he'll win. I think he'll give it his best shot. But as I've said, and you said, he's got to go through a whole lot of us to get to that point. And there's a
That's
lot
right.
of us.
That's right.
We are, I feel a lot of times we're the silent majority. I'm not saying that there's not a whole that there aren't a whole lot of Republicans that don't think the same way they do. But there are a lot of other people through that going through ish. I
Right.
mean, if the senior citizens like you and soon to be me, yeah, here, if once we start remembering, hey, this man wants to take away Social Security, a
Yes.
lot of senior citizens are on a fixed income. Okay, they don't have. A lot of them have children that don't really look out for them, so they depend on their Social Security.
That's right.
And I feel that what Biden has been doing, which is to bust their secret out there like he did last week, and just keep rubbing it in their faces. Don't hold back like how they used to. I'm sorry, I love Obama, but Obama used to just be nice. Listen, we live in an era right now where you can't be nice. You gotta step your game up. Okay, Michelle Obama said, "When they go, you go high. When they go low, you go high." That don't always
Yeah,
work. When they go low, you gotta go down low a little
every,
bit.
every now and then we get to go low too. Damn it. We get to listen. We no. I love Michelle. She's so right at a certain level, but
Mhm.
we can't let these people get away with this stuff
No, we can't.
without striking back, without calling them hypocrites, and without calling out the danger that they
Mhm.
pose. Listen, I
I-
don't want to lecture to you because I know you know this, but this is what autocrats do. This is what Hitler did. You go after the intellectuals, you go after the media, and then you go after the children. And
And
you
he's doing that with this stay woke or go woke, whatever the heck it is, where he's
exactly,
he's targeting the grade the first, second, third, the middle school, elementary. Yeah, he's targeting that age group because he knows that he's catering to the next generation because they are the next generation. So if you could muddy their minds, you're good. So I mean, the man kind of smart, but we got to be smarter. You know what I mean? I have more questions. Um, I have about three more. Yeah, but I
all
love
right.
in this. So let's see. Since the Miami riots in 1980, there have been a couple of riots, some riots following. I have some of them listed here. Los
Yes.
Angeles in 1992 with Rodney King, Cincinnati, Ohio with Timothy Thomas, Ferguson with Michael Brown. We have Freddie Gray in 2015. It's almost like an average of every year. We got North Carolina 2016 up until recently with Tyree Nichols. What is it that is missing or ignored with regards to the relationship between law enforcement and the public with emphasis on people of color? What do you think is missing? Because remember, these officers that killed Tyree, they're black.
We're black.
They're
They were
people of
black.
color.
It's the problem in terms of what's happening with the use of police power
Mm-hmm.
against blacks that we now so much see as a problem. It's not so much race as it is policing itself. Policing is the problem. If you have a police force that is led by someone who gives license to a squad of people who can go out and their job is to beat heads, knock heads. Well, cops, they're going to do that. The
They
chief
will.
said, our job is to go into the ghetto and put down crime. So when it's about leadership in the police department, where police officers feel that they can get away with things, and they do and they will. And that has been the consistent problem across the board. Listen, if you make police officers chase you on foot or much worse in a car at 100
Mm-hmm.
miles an hour, when they stop you, they're going to hurt you.
They will because they're already angry. The
Exactly.
adrenaline is pumping.
Exactly. Thank you. Whether they're white officers or black officers, if you run from them, it challenges them to come forth and do harm to you. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot tell you how many times I've said to my black young men, including my own sons, don't run from the police. Don't run. That gives them license. It's like you run from a lion. That makes them chase you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily race as much as it is the way police organizations view the black community, including black police officers. And it's about the kind of people who get attracted into police work and whether or not
Yes.
their psychological well-being is such that they should be given a gun and a badge and authority to go into an area and just knock heads. So uh, we have a lot of progress to make with police officers and policing in our country.
Well, I'm happy that you didn't say sensitivity training because to me that gets you nowhere. It's all about leadership. You
No,
could have sensitivity training every day, and if the leadership is crappy,
it's not going anywhere.
it's not going to go anywhere. So
Exactly.
I'm happy you didn't say that. I would have challenged you if you had said that, Dr. Dunn.
No, no.
Sorry.
I went through that in the 1980s. I moved past sensitivity training.
Oh
Uh,
my goodness.
way past that.
Okay. So I got two more questions. One, please define CRT and your thoughts on how it is being used against us as people of color.
CRT is the view that racism is institutionalized in America.
Mhm.
That it didn't just end at the Civil War. That there were institutions in place that carried forth racial discrimination, for which the country and black people in particular are paying the price today.
Mhm.
That's CRT. In no school, public school in Florida that I know of, is CRT being taught. It's being taught in a few law schools. It is not being offered in schools, and probably should not be. But that is the rallying point. Somehow or another, DeSantis has made those three letters uh, anathema to white America.
Well, you see, let me see if we could. My thoughts on that is this: I feel that here we go, the Democratic Party does not know how to message properly because when they started using CRT against us, nobody said anything. Nobody did anything. Even the woman who made CRT popular,
You're
the
so, so
black
right. You're so right about
minister,
that.
mhm,
You're right.
she
You're
didn't
right.
do anything. So I mean, and I'll be honest with you, okay? I didn't really know what CRT was, and which would have been easy to figure out. All they got to do is Google the darn thing, you know what I mean? But then I was getting angry because I'm like, the woman who made it popular is not even defending it, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
that means that when you don't defend, when you don't start having conversations, they create the narrative.
Exactly. They
In
they
order
become
to
the
create the
narrative.
narrative.
And may I make one point about that? Let's take the whole thing
Sure,
about queer studies. Can we talk about that for a minute?
sure, sure.
Because DeSantis and others have used that as a weapon. Oh, they're coming after your children to make them queer. If I had written the AP uh, studies program, I would have included queer studies. I may not have called it that, but I would have included the study of why it is that Black people in my country and possibly in the Caribbean and other places are so anti-gay. If you are a homosexual person in the Black community, you're in trouble. Don't have
Mm-hmm.
gender issues in the Black community because we will hurt you in various
Mm-hmm.
ways, more so than in a white area. So why is that? And why should that not be studied by the best minds in our country?
Mm-hmm.
I and then for the scientists and others to say, well, now they're using queer studies to capture your children and make them gay. We need to understand why we are so anti-gay in our Black communities. A lot of that goes back to our religious upbringing. We're Baptist, we're Methodist, we're Pentecostal, and those sects are very, very anti-gay. Beyond that, a lot of that stuff comes from Africa. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of that anti-gay stuff comes from Africa into the Caribbean, where you could be beaten to death on the streets in broad daylight for being gay, and nothing will happen to you. So
Mm-hmm.
it is a legitimate subject matter for African American studies, but maybe the right title invited too much red meat from the other side.
And again, they didn't defend it. I mean, gee,
And
I
yes, and
remember
it was
being
not
nice.
defended. It was not defended.
It was not
It was
defended. I mean, if you come up with something, I'm not saying that she was the one that came up with it. I'm saying that she was the one that popularized it, right? You got to defend your baby, okay? If you're not defending your baby, then you're gonna let people just come along and tear the limbs off and the feet off and do whatever they want with it. And that's what the right has done. So, and even Republicans that have strayed away from Trump have said that, and time again, Democrats need to learn to message properly. If they will only learn to message and stop having a high bar, set a high bar, they wouldn't be in some of the complicated spots that they're in right now.
Right. That
The
was what
party is changing because
yeah,
go ahead.
that is see, Trump did that very well. Trump was very good at messaging.
Oh yeah,
And
oh yeah,
we have got to raise to that level, and we
we have.
can. We cannot let them dictate the narrative as we go forward. We cannot let I since when is woke bad? I don't mind being woke, and but somehow or another they have defined that as if you're woke, that's a bad thing.
It's
Oh
a
no,
bad thing.
no, no, let's
It's a
retake the
bad
narrative.
thing.
Let's retake the
And
narrative.
let's retake it. And I'm good with that. I got one more question for you.
All
It's
right.
a simple one, I think. What solutions do you have, or where we should go from here as people of color? That would be Caribbean American, African American. Where do you suggest we go from here?
It's a good question. We must become visible opponents to what's going on. Just as we did in the 60s, we must rise up and go to rallies, meetings, make our voices and our presence known. If we don't show up, then we give up our history to those who will squander it. There's no, what can I, how can, there's nothing short of showing up that's good. We need to be there and have our voices heard and our presence recognized. And I don't know of anything more effective than showing up and being there and being loud and being heard.
Yeah.
And voting, of course.
And voting. Like,
Yes.
all of that I needs to help people connect the dots to voting, and voting in the election cycles, like the primaries and stuff that will give us the teeth. One more question that just popped into my head. There's a school that's named after you in Miami, Florida. Can you tell us a little bit about that school?
Thank you for asking.
You're
I've,
welcome.
I've had a lot of jobs in my life, and being principal of that school for 15 years was the best job that I ever had. We started that school after the 1980 riots, when so many young people were on the streets involved in that. And I was blaming the Dade County school system for not reaching out young people and keeping them in school. And I thought to myself, well, it's easy for you to say that. Why don't you start a school and try to show the system how you can better maintain students in school? So the Academy for Community Education, which is now known as the Dr. Marvin Dunn Academy for Community Education, was started to show the Dade County school system how to maintain more kids who are at high risk of dropping out in the school system. And we did that. The school is still in existence. And I was the guy in the school you didn't want to have to go see. You want to see anybody but Dr. Dunn. And schools need that. We just need that. You don't want to go see the principal. That was not going to be a good outcome. And I've said several times on programs, in response to this nonsense from the other side. If our school was a diverse population of students, white, black, Hispanic, and if one of my teachers had told a white student that you should feel guilty about what happened during the Civil War, I would have had that teacher out of my building that day. I would not have tolerated that. This is not happening in our schools today, but DeSantis is using this to frighten white people into thinking they've got to sweep in.
Let's be honest about why it's not happening. It's not happening because he has managed to put his people on the school boards. All right.
That's
so
right.
Like I tell you, I don't like the man, but you got to give him some points for being slick. Okay, he is slick.
He's baby Trump. He's baby Trump. He's taking some of Trump's ideas and he's making them work a little bit better for himself, making people believe he's a little cleaner than Trump.
He is a little bit cleaner, and that's the scary part because he's clean. Because so far, what DeSantis wants, DeSantis gets, and we have to try and stop in his tracks. Question: is it K through 12, your academy?
No, high school. 10, 11, 10, just upper grades.
Okay. Yeah. I have to say thank you to Mr. Whittle. I believe that's his name, the current principal.
That's right.
Yeah. So please tell him thank you, okay?
He got you in with me at a very difficult time to get in because of all the things that are going on. But when Mr. Whittle calls, we try to respond to that. So I'm glad to have had the conversation with you tonight.
I am so happy we've had this conversation. And I look forward to having you on the People's Chat Room, which is the Saturday show, but which is live. This one is live. But I really appreciate everything that you have done as a historian, as an academician, as an activist, as a citizen of the United States, but more importantly, a citizen of Florida, because you keep the history alive. And I appreciate that. We appreciate that. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Hina, I am smiling from ear to ear. Fantastic conversation with Dr. Marvin Dunn. So I got to say good night, got to say goodbye, but I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation, and we will see you on another episode of Caribbean Street Talk. This is Lima Dunbar for Caribbean Street Talk, where you get real conversations and great interviews. Tuesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. on islandbeatradio.net and Mondays on itunesradio.com, also from 8 to 9 p.m. Please subscribe to our Facebook page and YouTube channel at Caribbean Street Talk.